All right. And then David, whenever you are ready to get started, go ahead.
All right, sounds good. Let's see here. Get my screen share working. Um, okay. All right. Can everybody see my screen?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right. So before I get into the presentation, I guess I'm going to talk a little bit about myself before I talk about myself. So I'll give a quick intro. So I'm David Weiss. I live in Connecticut. Married with 2 kids. I have a 14-year-old daughter and an 11-year-old son. My day job, I am a senior developer at Deepwatch, which is a cybersecurity startup. And then nights and weekends, I'm actually started my own solopreneur software business at the beginning of the year. So I'm currently working on building out a Slack app, and also writing a lot in my weekly newsletter and posting a lot on LinkedIn and X. So pretty busy, but I like it that way. So awesome. So let's get started here. Let me see if I can. Oh, there we go. Okay. Cool. So yeah, definitely want to talk about my journey today. I think that helps tell my story and gives a little bit of context into why I never became a full stack dev and why I wanted to focus on front end. And then I have some advice I'd love to share with all of you, and then obviously save some room at the end for questions. So, all right, so we're going to start with the baby years. So 2007 is when I changed careers. I actually used to be a Spanish teacher before I got into software engineering. And yeah, I mean, how I started out was really just picking up some books on HTML and CSS, and teaching myself that. And then I really enjoyed that and wanted to dive a little bit deeper. So I actually enrolled in a online web design and development certificate program with this online college. So I was taking courses for that during my free time. It's very similar to kind of nowadays boot camps, but back in the day, they didn't really have boot camps yet. But I was glad that this online college had this program. And it was both courses in design and development. So I think that kind of influenced my trajectory in my career. But it was great to get exposure to both kind of aspects of the web, right? My first official job title was web application developer. So I got a job at the end of the year, end of 2007, for this small startup in Connecticut called Gigmasters, working on their website. And actually, web application developer was kind of like a full stack role, to be honest. It was like full stack before full stack became cool, right? So I was, creating databases and or creating database tables, writing SQL, working with ASP.NET, and then obviously working on the front end with, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. A couple of years into my career, I really started falling in love with the front end and CSS. I remember reading some books on it and being so blown away by how powerful it was. And around this time is when CSS3, HTML5 came out, responsive web design. So CSS was just becoming more and more powerful in the browser. And I kind of told myself like, hey, I want to really focus on this and become an expert in front end technologies. I just enjoyed that more than working with databases and like writing SQL and things like that. So rose to a senior level at Gigmasters while I was there around 2010 or something like that, and then ended up leaving in 2012. The next 4 years were kind of a struggle, kind of tough for me. I ended up leaving to go join an agency, and really did not like it. I don't know how much you all know about agency life, but typically you'll work on, a project for a client for a couple weeks or a couple months, and then when it's done, you kind of ship it off to them, and then you never really see it again, never interact with it, never kind of get to find out how it performed. And I didn't really like that, coming from previously working for a startup for an actual company on their product. It just was kind of tough for me. So I didn't really like that. And for the next couple of years, I was really just kind of bouncing around from contract to contract. And I'd have a 6-month contract, and then I'd be unemployed for a little bit, and then I'd have another 6-month contract. So it was kind of a rough period. But I continued to stay focused on the front end, and continued to kind of believe in the skills that I had, and wanted to continue to grow as a web developer, obviously. But during that time, when I look back on it, I really wasn't that inspired, to be honest, to do a lot of stuff outside of work, side projects, learning new technologies. I think part of the reason for that was because I wasn't really happy with my day jobs, and I didn't have a full-time job. I kind of just had contracts here and there. So that was, yeah, kind of a little bit of a dark period in my career, but managed to kind of get through that, and move on to the roller coaster years. And this is really defined by remote work. Even before this period, I was starting to work from home. And I had my children were pretty small at the time, a couple years old, and they were in daycare. And it was just like, I just was so excited to be working remotely, and like to be able to work from home, to be able to, like, pick them up from daycare if they got sick, or just whatever, like run into town to run errands or work out, take a walk during the day. Like, there's a lot of things you can do when you're obviously working from home, when you're remote, that you can't really do in an office setting. So that's kind of where I really started to become excited about remote work, and I haven't really looked back since then. And I've worked for about, I think, 3 companies during this time, and so I was really getting used to the startup life, and all that comes with that, the good and the bad. Having to wear multiple hats in your role, and having to maybe sometimes work on a feature, get really close to releasing it, and then have to drop it and pivot to something else, because the startup decided to go in a different direction, or leadership at the company wanted to pivot. So I still love working at startups, and I mean, I'm currently at a startup now. So um you know I think the benefits outweigh the negatives, for sure, at least for me. And then towards the end of that time, I really started getting into engineering leadership, and really like talking to people in my network, and learning as much as I could about what it meant to be an engineering leader, an engineering manager. And at this point, I was I had been an individual contributor for 10 plus years, and I was kind of thinking long term, and looking at my career, and thinking, well, I don't want to be coding forever, and I'd love to be a people leader. So I did eventually get an engineering manager role at a company, and it was a little short lived, but I was grateful for that opportunity. And it was just awesome to finally have some direct reports, and have official one-on-ones with them, and really like take that seriously, like the idea of career development, career growth, and really trying to help engineers grow, and learn new things, and reach their goals. So I really enjoyed doing that. And then lastly, this period was in part a roller coaster, because I was laid off once, and I was actually fired another time. So um and I put this in here because I feel really strongly about this, that like this needs to be normalized. The fact that people do get laid off, people do get fired. It's not something that anybody should be ashamed of. And it's a tough thing to go through in the moment. Obviously I had a lot of emotions, and I was angry, frustrated, had a lot of like self-doubt put into me. I mean, there were days and weeks where I thought like maybe I should change careers again, right? And do something else. Maybe I don't have what it takes. But I got through all that, and I think it's important to, it's just important to normalize that and to be um, okay with accepting that and admitting that sometimes that happens in your career, and it doesn't mean that you're a bad person. It doesn't mean that you don't have the skills or the abilities to do that job. It just, a lot of times it's just a business decision. And a little bit later, I'm going to talk about, building in public and building your brand. And I think that is, with the climate nowadays and just the job market, with engineering, with product teams, with HR. I mean, it's still very challenging and hard to get a job, right? And I think it's even more important now to be building your brand and thinking about building your connections and your network, in the event that you do unfortunately get laid off or get fired, right? Like, you don't want to be in that situation and not have anyone to turn to, or any like clout or reputation online or on social media. So I think that's definitely important. And then, the after I got fired, I was actually out of work for about 8 months. It was really rough. I ran some numbers and stats when I finally did get the job at Deepwatch last year, but I think I applied to over 500 jobs. And I think I had like, between like around 150 interviews or something like that. And I made it to the final round like 4 or 5 times. It was really, really tough. And it took every like ounce of courage, energy, strength within me to keep going. And I just was so grateful when I got the job at Deepwatch last May, and could finally take that like green banner down on my LinkedIn page. And yeah, I've been with Deepwatch for just about a year now, as a senior developer. uh, for 6 months last year, I was actually in a team lead role. So it was pretty awesome. 2 months after joining the company, my manager came to me and said, "Hey, we're rolling out this swarm rep program where we want one developer on each team to basically be the lead, right? Be the captain for the team. Um, be responsible for knowing what's going on with the projects and statuses for all the developers on the team, going to some additional meetings, doing some planning and road mapping with the product team and things like that." So it was great to, like, when I left the management role and I went back to IC as a senior developer, part of me was like, well, I mean, yeah, I'm doing this because I need a job, but I still would love to be a leader. I still would love to manage again, right? So it was so cool to have that opportunity to be a team lead. And now, at the beginning of the year, I kind of got cycled off of that role, and somebody else went in because it's a rotating role that my company's doing. But at least I had my shot, and I did a great job, I think, for 6 months. And if there's ever a manager role that opens up at Deepwatch, I think I'll have a really good shot at applying and getting that role. So I'm excited about that. And then yes, and then last year started doing some entrepreneur type stuff, working with a couple people on some side projects that kind of fizzled out, and then really since the beginning of the year, I've been focused on, kind of starting my own side business as a solopreneur. And I started building this Slack app called Agendaful, which is an app to create meeting agendas for one-on-ones. It's directly, the idea came from leadership and management, right? Like me not enjoying or not finding value in some of the other tools out there to create one-on-one agendas. And so I kind of decided to come up with my own thing for it. So, so at the beginning of the year, I kind of told myself, hey, I'm going to build this app and I'm going to build it in public. And, I kind of did a little research on building in public and started checking out the community on X, and I started doing it. I had no idea how to do it or what to do, but like I've slowly grown my account on X. I've connected with some great people, some other builders within the community. There's a lot
So
of people.
should I get on Twitter is what we're
Yes.
saying.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
There's such a strong presence of tech people on. I mean, there's always been, ever since the beginning of Twitter, there's always been engineers, developers on Twitter, on X, but the build in public community is just tremendous. There's so many people all over the world that are doing the same things that a lot of us are doing, right? Like they work 9 to 5 and then nights and weekends, they're building stuff. They're playing around with new technologies. They're trying to build, SaaS apps and monetize them and, maybe, slowly build their business on the side. So, yeah, I highly recommend it. And, you can always reach out to me later and I can, share some like accounts to follow or tips and things like that. But that's been really great to, to be able to build something, the problem the problem with building something on the side or on your own is it does get lonely. And there's a lot of times where you're building something and you're just not sure what to do. You want advice. You don't want to make the wrong decision and you just don't know what to do, right? And so all of those things kind of somewhat go away when you're building in public because you can ask for feedback. You can DM with some people, with some builders, and like get advice. And so I've done that before, so that's a great thing. And yeah, and then I think the last thing I'll say before I move on to the next section is just for goals, like, I've been very intentional, I think, the past year or so about setting goals. And what I wanted to say about that is, I think goals are really important. When you're thinking about building like a side project or learning a new technology, uh, you know, it's so much easier to see progress and to have results with that when you set goals, right? Like if you think about it, if you just say, oh, I'm going to learn React, or oh, I'm going to learn this new component library, or I'm going to learn how to write better, right? It's hard. Life happens and things come up, right? Your day job gets in the way, your family can get in the way, like other hobbies and activities can come and go. And so and if unless you have goals, like it's really hard to make progress and see actual results. So that's something I've been very mindful of the past year or so, especially with the solopreneur stuff I've been doing with Agendaful. Like I had monthly goals, weekly goals, and that really helped push me to, get to MVP for my app. Because I was able to set those goals and I was able to say like, okay, hey, this week I need to do this thing, right? This week I need to I need to like create the database and the database schema and like start using an ORM like to connect and update the database, right? Like and putting those tasks into Trello, right? So I can kind of track them and follow them. So that's the last thing I wanted to say about that.
No, definitely. Can you give an example of the sort of goals you set? Because I feel like I see people set either like too high reaching goals that they're then quit, or goals that are out of their control. So then they quit. What kind of parameters do you set around your goals so that way they're achievable and you stick to them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, you know, it's not easy, I'll tell you that, because you want to set goals that you can measure and that are actionable, and you can see that progress, and you don't want to set too small goals, right? Like you want to kind of push yourself a little bit, and see what you can do. Like if you're like if you have a goal of like, okay, I'm going to write 50 lines of code, right? If that's something that you feel comfortable doing, you should probably push yourself a little bit more, right? And you should probably see like, well, what if I what if I set that goal to be 100 lines of code, right? Even if you don't get there, maybe you'll get to 80 lines or something like that. This is probably a bad example, but anyway, the point is that like you want to kind of set higher goals, right? And just be okay with not reaching them if that makes sense. But I think really the number one piece of advice I can give with goals is like just focus on one thing, you know. If you're building an app, if you're trying to learn a technology, like, and you set a weekly goal, like have it be one thing, right? Like for React, right? I talk a lot about React because that's what I use for my day job, and that's one of the frameworks I love or libraries I love. But for React, like set a goal and say, hey, I'm going to learn about React hooks this week, right? That's your one goal. That's your focus. Whenever you have time, evenings, weekends, like you're going to learn about React hooks, right? Um, Having that specific goal is a lot better than just saying, oh, I'm going to learn about React this week, like really try and narrow in into what particular like particular subject or topic you want to focus in on. So,
Okay, thank you.
all right. So that's the journey. I want to talk to you a little bit about why I, decided to focus on the front end, not become a full stack developer. And I have 4 points here. First of all, design. I think I mentioned this earlier, but I'm a very I consider myself to be fairly creative and artistic. I took some art classes in high school. When I first started out, I took some of those design courses, right? I took like some color theory, web design courses. And when I started working on the front end, like I really fell in love with being able to use different fonts and focus on typography, use CSS for transitions and animations, use responsive web design to build, mobile layouts and tablet layouts and designs and things like that. And I'm a visual person, so to me, it's a lot easier to focus on the visual aspects of a web app, right? The things that you're going to see in the browser. That's just a lot more exciting to me than the back end and dealing with data, right? The other thing is UX. I ever since I started coding and building web apps, I have always thought about myself as a user, right? And I've always thought about other users that are going to use the app, right? And I think that has, if you're going to work on the front end, like you need to care about user experience, right? And you need to kind of put yourself in the shoes of your customers, your users that are going to use it, right? Like from everything, everything from like, oh well, what if their internet is slow, or what if they have an older browser version? Like what is the website going to look like from their perspective? Or and then accessibility things, right? Like what if somebody's colorblind and the website does not have the appropriate colors and they're going to struggle reading it, right? And then from that perspective all the way to more of the layout, kind of architecture of a website, right? Like where's the best place to put the site navigation? What do you do on mobile when you have 20 links, or you have 20 links in your header for desktop, and then on mobile, what do you do with those 20 links, right? Do you use a hamburger icon? Do you like have a slide out menu? And then dealing with different types of data and content on the front end, on the web, like how toggling sections open and closed, really thinking about how a user is going to interact with that website, and whether things are going to make sense for them, right? So that's something that I've always been really passionate about, and I think for somebody working on the front end, that's kind of necessary, right?
Hey, David, you have a question in the chat.
Oh
Crystal
yeah.
would like to know, do you have any resources that you would recommend, like books, series, etc.? And Christine, can you clarify, because you asked this a few minutes ago, but what specifically were resources about what?
Like, UX and design, like the front end stuff that he's talking about, like.
Yeah. I actually haven't read front end focused books in a long time. I did earlier on in my career, but most of the resources have been things online. So there's some websites and blogs that I'll check out from time to time, and I'm subscribed to some newsletters as well. So I can dig for that information and get that to you all later.
Oh, that's all right. I was just wondering if there's anything you would think of as like, oh, that's a really good way to do it. Like that influenced how you think, you know?
Yeah, great. Yeah, and then I think, moving on to skills, like obviously that was something early on that I realized was, hey, I have stronger skills in the front end than the back end, and I, give me a mock-up, give me a design, and I can, slice it up into, the right HTML tags and use JavaScript, use CSS. That just kind of came naturally to me more than working on the back end and dealing with data, right? So I think that was another thing I realized is like, hey, I can focus on parts or areas of web development that I have strong skills in, or I can, not do that. And, I decided to focus on, kind of go for the area where I have the skills. And lastly, it just really felt like home. I think there were times where I would work on full stack projects, and when I got to the front end portion of it, I just felt like I was home, and I felt like I knew exactly what to do. I was excited about the work. I could kind of get into that flow state and really enjoy working on that, right? And I think that when that happens, you need to listen to yourself and pay attention to the, web developers, software engineers, a lot of times we have to do, we do a lot of different things. We fix bugs, we build new features, we refactor code, we clean up things. And, there's always going to be some things that we don't enjoy or don't like. And then there's going to be other things that we really like, and we could do it for hours on end, right? And so I think paying attention to that early on in your career can be really helpful. So.
I
All
love
right.
it. You do have a question, but do you want to hold it until you get to your questions part?
Oh no, what is so yeah, I mean, I've worked with some really great graphic and product designers over the years. And I think it helps to know something about, CSS and animations, transitions, to be able to work with them, because you can bounce ideas off of each other. You can kind of show them code and show them how things work. So, a lot of places, a lot of companies I've worked with really good designers that already know, hey, I want to apply this transition. I want to do this animation. I'm thinking about this layout for mobile. So it's really just a matter of me implementing what they came up with, but I think having knowledge in UX, having knowledge in animations and things like that definitely makes it a lot easier to work with designers, because you can work together, you can be a team and kind of come up with the best possible UX. Awesome. So yeah, before I kick it over to questions, definitely wanted to leave you all with some advice. These are things that I wish somebody had told me earlier on in my career. But yeah, number one, explore tech. A couple slides ago, I talked about my struggle years where I wasn't really motivated or inspired. And I think that, when you go through phases like that and you say, I don't need to learn that, I don't need to explore that technology, um, it's just not good. It can delay your learning and your growth in something. And sometimes you can actually be saying no to something that you actually really enjoy, and case in point, I started learning React. I didn't start learning React until like 3 or 4 years after it came out. And I remember when it came out and I'd heard about it, and I was like, I don't have time for this. I don't want to learn it. I know Angular now. I'm going to use Angular. And then, people at my jobs, started using React and asked me to pitch in and help out with the project they were working on, and I started learning it. And then started using React in my side projects outside of work and just love it. I mean, I'm still using React today. It's like, I wouldn't change it for the world, So that's an example of like something that I was a little hesitant to get into. But once I did, I really enjoyed it. It made sense to me, and I love working with it. So one piece of advice for all of you is, just don't be afraid to explore technologies, right? Like if there's a technology or framework that your coworkers or friends are talking about, and you're like, huh, that looks a little interesting, right? Listen to yourself when that happens, and take a weekend and read some blog posts about that technology, or watch some YouTube videos, right? Or download that that package or that framework onto your computer and start playing around with it, right? It's going to, if you get into the habit of doing that, you're going to put yourself in that state of continually learning and continually growing. And you're going to be able to hold your own when some of these technologies and frameworks maybe come up in conversations at work or whatnot. And it, like I said, it could turn you on to something really exciting that you never thought you would be interested in before. And then the next piece of advice I have, which I talked a little bit about before, is, I would definitely start, if you haven't started building your brand, like start today, start tonight, start tomorrow. And like, I alluded to this earlier, but the job, I mean, really ever since the pandemic, I mean, the job market for tech, for HR, like a lot of different industries or sectors has been really rough, and it hasn't fully recovered, right? And as you can use me as an example. I mean, people do get laid off, people get fired, and like it definitely happens out there. And if you're building your brand along the side, if you're paying attention to that and devoting time to that when you can, you're going to grow fans and supporters online on social media. You're going to you know put your work out there. Like, it's just you're going to make new friends and connections and networking, so that if God forbid that does happen where you lose your job, you can turn to those people, right? You can turn to your network, you can get support from them, you can ask them if they know of any jobs that are available. But from my perspective, just a plain old resume is not good enough nowadays. Like, companies want to see more than that. They want to see your social media presence. They want to see that you're maybe active in communities. When I was like earlier on in my career, everybody was like, oh, like GitHub, right? Like, let me see your GitHub. Let me see, like here's, you apply with your resume and your GitHub URL, right? And it's like, yeah, like that's great and all, but like there's more that you can do, right? There's like, you can build in public, you can, uh you can start building something and post about it, talk about it, like share screenshots of what you're building, set goals and kind of share them with other people. Talk about like, hey, I like last night I wrote this database schema, and I'm using three database tables for this, and this is how I have it laid out, right? Or I started using React in my project, and I created the header component or the footer component, right? Like, being very specific about the details of what you're building, what you're doing. That is going to show not only other builders out there that like you're serious about this, and that you're a part of that community, but it's going to show prospective employers and other companies out there that you take your skills and your craft very seriously, right? The other thing I wanted to mention for advice is speak up, and I think that this applies to your interactions with your coworkers, but also yourself. I think the best teammates that I've had, the best colleagues and coworkers, have been the ones that have spoken up, right? They have, if I am not doing something right, or if I said something, maybe that they disagreed with, or they didn't like, they spoke up, they let me know about it, right? If there was something in my code that they thought was maybe detrimental to the code base or not not in sync with best practices or whatever, they would let me know, right? It like those are the best coworkers and colleagues, because they're going to hold you accountable for the work you're doing, and they're going to help you grow and learn, right? So my advice would be, like, don't be afraid to speak up. And also this applies to positivity and praise as well, like, those are, I love, I try and do that whenever possible, right? Like, give a shout out to somebody who's doing a good job. Maybe somebody maybe somebody at my job, they worked on like 10 bugs in a week and they, fixed all of them, right? Like, being able to shout them out on Slack or something like that, I think is huge. So, being able to speak up, I think, with your team and with your coworkers whenever there is some conflict or some disagreement, and then also being able to speak up when when they do something great that you're proud of, I think, is also important. And then lastly, for speaking up, like, speak up for yourself. Don't be afraid to talk to your manager, talk to the leaders at your company, ask for things. Like, if you're ready to take on new responsibilities, ask for them, speak up. If you want that promotion, you want that raise, like, ask for it, speak up. There's, and this is like a direct correlation to my career, because I worked at some companies and I had some jobs where I just coasted, and I was like, oh, my manager will promote me someday, or I'll get that raise someday. I'll become a manager someday. Right. And like, the problem with that is that, nobody else, like, everybody's thinking about themselves, I mean, and like, it's, you never want to put that on somebody else. You never want to expect somebody else to like be your biggest advocate or your supporter. Nobody knows you better than yourself. And, all the obstacles and challenges you've overcome, how much you've grown, your skills. So you're the best person to support yourself and advocate for yourself, right? So, don't be afraid to speak up when it comes to your career and what you want, and additional responsibilities you want, changes you want to see made, because a lot of times if you don't do that, nobody else is going to. So that's what I have to say about that. And then lastly, touch grass. This is kind of a phrase that I've heard online recently, but it's so important. I mean, I spend so much time in front of screens and on my computer, and I really like, I still try and get as much sleep as I can. I still try and exercise. Like, don't lose sight of that. I know it's tough when you work for your day job as a coder and you're programming, and then you go home at night, see your family, eat something quick, and then hop back on your computer and do more stuff. Like, I do that too. I mean, that's like how that's life sometimes, but make sure you're taking time to get your sleep, to get your rest, see your family, take nights off, like, take breaks, take nights off, like, go to the movies, go watch something on Netflix, like, go take a walk. Like, though, being able to do that is so important, because it not only is it important for your health, like your mental health and your physical health, because you're resting your eyes and your body from the screens. But I can't tell you how many times I have been stuck in some coding problem or bug that I'm trying to fix, and then I'll walk away for a little while, come back, and I'll be able to fix it. So being able to take those breaks away from your computer and your screens, it just allows you to have that break from the code that you're writing. And sometimes when you can't figure something out, that's the best thing you can do, is just kind of walk away for a little bit, clear your head, take a break. And so, as exciting as it is to continue to code and program and build things, at work and then at home on the side, please make sure you're, like, taking time away from screens and devices, because there really is more to life than coding and programming and your computer and devices, right? And
Lies. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. So,
JK.
all right. That's all I have for today. I'll leave some links up here that you can check out. And I'm happy to answer any other questions that you have.
Yeah. Anybody feel free to unmic and go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, I have a question. Wait, sorry. Does somebody want to add?
No, get out. Wait till after. You're good.
Okay, okay. Um, yeah, my first question is, yeah, my biggest concern. Okay. By the way, my name is Ji Yang. Also, name is Jane. Nice to meet you, David. Um, and my biggest concern is, David, do you think, with the appearance of AI, do you think it will steal our jobs?
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. I think that I think AI is obviously doing a lot of great things. There's a lot of great things you can do with AI right now. But I feel like the general sentiment from the engineering community, at least, is that we can't trust AI 100%, right? And I think there's been some examples of that in social media recently. But yeah, I mean, to me, I think that's I get the sentiment that AI needs to be checked, it needs to be controlled, it needs to be kind of authenticated, and it's great to use like GitHub Copilot to like write some of your code, but you should never like just have GitHub Copilot write everything and then push it to production and not check it, right? That's like dangerous, right? Because you want to have some human interaction with that. You want to have some eyes on it to verify that that's the right thing. So I don't think AI is going to take anybody's job in the near future, but I do think it does look like it's here to stay, and I feel like it's something that we all should explore, on our own timelines and when we feel like the time is right. I think that pretty soon here, probably in a couple of years, you'll start seeing like job descriptions with asking for developers and engineers with AI experience, right? With experience in certain AI tools and plugins and frameworks and things like that. So yeah.
Yeah, I better get started on learning AI then. Thank you, David.
And not to like put you on the spot, Callie, but that would be an awesome workshop or presentation or something that we could all do together. Being able to learn, like, I think the challenge is that right now there's so many different AI tools and frameworks and libraries. Like before it was just Chat GPT, but now there's like all different kinds of things that people are using, right? And language learning models and all this stuff. So the hard part is like, where do you start, right? And which one do you pick and how do you get started? So
Yeah. If you actually, not to like super plug myself nonstop, but I'm doing a Learn in Public series on YouTube, and I'm actually using AI, like Christine just said in the chat, as if it's a senior developer, because I'm learning Go for work. Never worked with Go before. So I'll decide like, oh, I'm going to build this project. I'm going to follow this tutorial. And then I use Go to like explain, or I use AI Copilot to explain code for me and stuff like that. So I'm not an expert on AI, but if you do want to kind of see in like real life how I would use it at work, you can check out that series.
Yeah. Awesome.
All right. Catrice, did I see that you had a question? Maybe. All right. Who's next then? All right, go ahead.
I've seen that you used a lot of hashtags in your posts specifically, Callie. Do either of you guys have any recommendations for how you find the hashtags that you use?
Oh, I think David will probably be a better answer on this because I just do them as they come to my brain. I have no idea if they're helpful or not. David.
Are you talking about for X or?
Just for when you're like building in public.
Yeah, so that's like uh and somebody on X actually asked me that the other day, and I didn't really know how to respond, but I think that I don't think people I myself don't really click on the hashtags when I'm on X when I'm reading a post. But I think that X sees those hashtags with their algorithm and maybe surfaces that to certain people, right? So like if you are posting a lot of build in public stuff or following a lot of people that build in public, and I post with that hashtag, maybe I think maybe X will like do a better job at showing you that post, because it knows that you want to see build in public posts. So yeah, so a lot of the posts that I'll put on X, I'll throw the build in public or indie hackers hashtag on it, and sometimes I think it works. Other times, like I don't know if it does, but I think there may be something going on with the X algorithm where it's noticing those hashtags and it's maybe surfacing it to people that want to read that content.
Yeah, so that's like what hashtags were originally designed to do, is make an easy way for you to find specific content, right? So
Yeah.
I just wondered like if there was specific resources that you use to find the hashtags that you use.
Well, I mean, it's really just those two hashtags that I use on X. It's build in public and then indie hackers. And those are the two most common hashtags I see. Um, so I think, yeah, I mean, obviously the way hashtags work, you can use any word and just put the hashtag in front of it, right? But yeah, for the build in public community, those two are really popular.
Is it build in public or building in public?
I've seen both. I usually use build in public, but yeah.
Gotcha, I appreciate it.
Build in public also takes up less characters too. So
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
Get it, Grace.
I had two questions. Sorry, my
Sure.
phone died. I thought it was plugged in my computer, but apparently my computer was also dead. So apologize for popping out and back in. First question is, how do you protect your ideas while you're building in public?
That's a great question. So, there's a couple, there's like different schools of thought when it comes to that. I mean, I've heard people say like, you know, once you launch something and you have like a website up there, people are going to be able to view source and look at the code and kind of understand what you're doing. Or, if you're building like I don't know, if you're building like a Jira clone website, right? Like you have an idea of what the database tables are going to be and what the how you're going to store the data, and how it's going to be updated and things like that. So I've heard people say like, don't worry about it, because once you kind of launch something and it's out on the internet, like people are going to be able to understand what code you're using, whether you're using React or some other framework, whether you're using like Tailwind CSS or something. Like you can tell some of those things just by kind of inspecting the code. But I think the other thing is like I've seen people do a lot of different things. Like some people share everything, some people share their revenue, like they'll share like how much they're making a week or a month. And they're comfortable doing that. Other people don't really share that type of information. Some people will they'll be building a feature and they will post every day, and kind of incrementally you'll see that progress, like, hey, I got the header up, or I got the sidebar up, or I started connecting to the database, right? And then other people will just they'll post and they'll tweet or whatever, and then it'll be a big reveal, like they'll show like a substantial amount of work after a couple weeks or something. So yeah, I mean, I've seen all types, and it's really like there's no rules. I mean, you kind of do it how you want to do it and share how much or how little information you want. I think the idea is that you're just you're being vulnerable and you're putting yourself out there, and it's not easy to do. I mean, I like, especially for, I am tend to be more of a perfectionist and try and get all the details right. So sometimes I don't like to share things when they're not fully fleshed out and done. But that's the beauty of it, is that everybody's doing this at the same time. So I mean, nobody's, people are incrementally building. So they're sharing something that is not completed yet. And that's kind of the whole point of it.
And everybody's going to disagree on like what you should post to. Like, I'll run things by my husband and he disagrees every single time. Like my post the other day about the junior developer job fund, he was like, "Oh my gosh, why would you share how much is in the fund? Like, don't share that. You don't have very much in the fund. It's going to like flop." And then it was like one of my best posts. So, you know what I mean? So everybody's going to have opinion. Some things work, some things don't. I would drive it more by like with data and like what's working for you than anything else.
That's good. I had a second question. Is that okay, or we want to move on?
Yeah. What's up?
So I love the front ends, but I'm realizing I've had a couple technical interviews and I've neglected like understanding or handling data and being able to, I guess, show what I can do, because it takes me a while to actually get there. So like, any tips on like passing the technical interview as somebody who wants to specialize in front end web development?
Sorry, are you talking about technical interview? Are you talking about legal?
Just any kind of technical interview. So I'm sure they use leak code style questions, but like data algorithms, things that I don't necessarily like. I deal with data like sometimes, but not to the extent as somebody on the back end would. And so
Okay.
like tips.
Okay, that the only way to get better is to start doing it. But my advice to you is go and do Lico.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I've had quite a number of interviews that I've bombed and failed because of like leak code style questions, data algorithm stuff. Um, and a couple years ago, it got to the point where I was like, all right, I got to do something about this. I think I bought some Udemy courses focused on like JavaScript, like algorithms and things like that, and got some books and stuff like that. So yeah, it's tough. I mean, like job interviews are hard. Engineering job interviews are hard because a lot of times even if it's front end focus, like they expect you to know data algorithms and be able to answer some leak code style questions. So there isn't it you kind of have to spend some time with that and learn, um and one good piece of advice that I can share is like, if whether you do great or poorly in an interview, and if it is very technical and you're getting a lot of questions, don't schedule anything after the interview. Like, give yourself a half an hour so that you can like regurgitate everything that was asked. And like, I've done that before where I've like finished an interview, I've been like, oh, that was awful, I failed that. Let me jog my memory and think of the questions they asked me, and then later when I have time, I'll go online and like figure out the answers to it, and so like that's important, because then, if maybe there's a pattern that you're noticing, like, hey, maybe it's a specific type of data algorithm that I'm having trouble with, or maybe there's a part of JavaScript that like you're just still have questions about and you don't really understand. So like that can be, if you kind of document that and note and take note of that, then you can do something about it, right? You can learn and get better at it. So
Thank you.
I have a question on my end, David. Um, which is currently I'm collaborating with um with other new devs on my current project. Um, but I'm like the person that mainly do everything, like commit a lot of hours on a project. And I recently received some advice from a senior front end dev. Uh, he he advised me to write before the UX design to the first write down in note in actual text of what each elements do, like what happened what happened to the header when you click it. Every single interaction you write it in text first, and then you would do the UX design. I was like, oh my God, I'm bad with UX design, and I'm already under so much workload. I have to do everything. What's your opinion on this, David? Oh, and also I'm like I'm basically the lead here, as a junior, and we were using Jira and everything to plan out the project. What what's your take on this, David?
So I want to understand this a little bit better. Is this a work project or?
No, the personal project.
Okay.
Do you advise me like to do his route, like writing notes and and then the and then do the UX design?
Is this person wanting you to write notes to, is this for uh, like animations and,
Uh, I mean, it's for user interaction. What would you do? What happened if you click this header? What happened if you click this drop down button? Uh, it includes it must include add button, delete button, edit button. He wants me to like write everything in text. Um, do you advise it?
I mean, it sounds to me like this is, uh, like if you have a Figma file or if you have some kind of a design, I mean, I think that should be sufficient, right? Like if you're, let's say you're working with a designer and they have a mock-up of what you need to build, right? That's the place to put some of those design or UX notes, right? So you can say like, hey, when you hover on this button, the background color is going to change, or there's going to be a slight transition of the color. Um, so yeah, I mean, that's how I've seen it in kind of my day job and at previous jobs where designers have gone into like design files and they've actually put some of those notes in there. Um, but yeah, I mean, I don't, I guess I don't disagree with what he's saying. I don't know if like you should be spending way too much time, doing these notes, but I mean, I think
Yeah.
having a sense of how something is going to change when the user interacts with it, especially when it comes to like buttons or menus, opening and closing. um Sometimes it's easier to just jot it down, write it down, document it. The I'm working on a project at work right now where I'm building out this new sidebar for customers, and the designer actually wrote notes in Jira, and he said like, hey, uh this sidebar is gonna slide out, animate out 200 milliseconds, ease in, ease out,
Mm.
transition speed or whatever, or um transition, yeah, speed or something like that. So he
Duration,
actually, what was that?
I think it's called transition duration.
Yeah, it's or timing or something like that, or yeah. But he actually wrote it in the Jira Epic, so like
Yeah.
he wrote it down specifically, like, hey, this is the time, the duration of the transition, right? So um yeah, a lot of times it can save you like some headaches later on when you're coding, because you can just go to that and say, oh, okay, I know I have to do this type of transition, this is the duration. You know, and it's, those details are really important when you're building, you know, because it's kind of documented so you can always find it in case you forget, you know.
Yeah, great. Yeah, yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, David, for this presentation and then answering all of our questions. And everybody can go ahead and connect with David on LinkedIn or Twitter. Also, guys, I'm not gonna lie, I made my first, is it still called a tweet? During this session.
I would
But yeah.
assume product.
What is it called? Nope, can't do it. Can't do it. But yeah, feel free to connect with David. He's always been super helpful on LinkedIn and probably Twitter too. Okay, so if you haven't signed up yet, the Deploy in Public workshop starts in 21 days. So go ahead and sign up. It's going to be a great time. It's going to be about 5 hours worth of work for 10 weeks. And if you complete it, you can take on some jobs for the Coding with Callie website and get paid for them. So that's pretty cool. Otherwise, I will see you guys next
Sorry,
week.
Callie, can
Yes.
you repeat that again? You said the Deploy workshop.
Yep, I can link it in the chat. So we are doing a cohort. It's called the Deploy in Public Workshop. It starts May 23rd and it goes through August 1st. Basically, you will have 10 assignments, one each week. I will stay 1 week ahead of you where I will do the assignment and then I will record myself doing the assignment and walking you through how to do it. You'll deploy 4 different apps over the course of those 10 weeks using a variety of AWS resources. And you'll work your way up from deploying something simple to deploying a full stack project by the end. I am going to be donating 70% of the registration fees to a jobs fund. So anyone who successfully completes the challenge, which is all 10 assignments and 10 LinkedIn posts about like building and deploying in public, hence why it's called the Deploy in Public Challenge. You will, if you complete that by August 1st, you will be eligible to take a Coding with Callie job and get paid for the work that you do on the Coding with Callie website. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Callie.
We have 9 people signed up so far, so it's going to be a good time. Also, maybe we'll, yeah, maybe we'll open it as a Twitter post too. We'll see. We'll see. All righty. Thanks again, David, and I will see you guys next week.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, guys.